Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to Cranium Couture, the finest establishment in Moonset for all your cranial needs.
Well, thank you. It's a lovely establishment, and I've heard nothing but wonderful things.
Well, we are very exclusive, and I can tell by your demeanor you're exactly the type of gentleman we cater to. I hope those dregs on the street didn't give you too much trouble.
Not at all. It's a lovely neighborhood, I must say. Now, do you mind if I place my head here on the countertop?
Not at all. Set it on our patented cranial pillow right there.
Yes, I am in the market for a new top. Well, I've been carrying this head around for quite a while, and I was looking to make possibly an upgrade of some kind.
Excellent, sir. Well, we have quite an eclectic collection here. Would you care for an espresso while we browse?
Oh, yes, please. Do put a little straw in it so my head can suckle on it. Oh, wow, I must say, a lovely selection here. Heads of all sizes and shapes. Beautiful.
Yes, please feel free to try them on at your leisure.
Yes, needless to say, I'm quite in over my head when it comes to these sorts of things. If you could please just point out some recommendations, ones you think might work for me.
Why, certainly, sir. Let's start with the Theodore Roosevelt model. I think it'll suit a rugged outdoorsman such as yourself.
Oh, well, may I try it on?
Be my guest.
Ah, yes! Oh, yes, this does feel quite good. I feel like I could go on a bison hunt. Yes! William Howard Taft is a dummy! Yes! Yes, I love this fine land, and this head seems to fit very well. But what else do you have?
Let's take a look here. Let's see. Maybe something a bit more modern. Here, let's try this. This is the Christian Bale model.
Yeah, this feels pretty good, yeah. Yeah, I like it. The neck's not too tight. Fits well around the collar. Yeah, I like it. Let me give it a little run here. You're a nice guy, but you're a fucking idiot! Yeah, I like that a lot. Let's keep looking now.
Well, if we want to stick with the British motif, but something a little more elegant, with a little more grace, might I suggest the Michael Caine model?
Oh, sure, if you don't mind, I'll try it on. Now that seems to work very well. I like it a lot. It is a little bit old for me, I think. The old would contrast with my body, but I do like it. Yes, this is very nice. Very nice. You know, some men just want to watch the world burn. Yeah, I like it. Thank you. Let's try something a little bit younger, sir.
How about something a little more American, something a little more salt of the earth? Try the McConaughey model.
Don't mind if I do? Well, all right. I'll tell you, there's a lot of good-looking ladies here tonight, walking around in Moonset. Man, I went and watched the volleyball game, the Moonset volleyball game. Man, them girls, they know how to play. Yeah, my oh my, good gracious. I drove there in my Lincoln, and I thought to myself as I was watching them girls play, hitting that ball back and forth, and I thought to myself, time is a flat circle, and that's all it is. I am that ball, just getting passed back and forth. Lincoln. Very nice. I did like that one a lot. I think American might be the way to go for me, maybe. What else do you have in that department?
Well, sticking with the American, but something a little more boisterous. How about we try the Commander-in-Chief?
Oh, okay. Let's fit this one on. It's a little thick. Let me tell you, this is one of the best heads, the greatest heads I've ever tried. Let me tell you, China could not make a head like this. All right? This is an American-made head for American workers, and it's the best. Wow, this might be a winner. I'm telling you, all the other heads I've tried on are losers. Disgusting, ugly losers. Wow, okay, I like that. A little
controversial maybe, but I do like a mix of the American with a bit of the high office vibe, but something maybe a little more laid back.
Maybe try the retired commander-in-chief.
Ooh, I must admit I've had my eye on this one since I walked in the door. Wow, I'll tell you one thing. I try it on, and I think, where's Dick Cheney? He's got to see it. Hopefully he doesn't shoot at me. Just kidding, Dick. Man, I like to sit back now and I like to do my paintings, watching some baseball on the TV. Man, I'll tell you one thing though. One of my greatest failures, I will admit, was not fighting the threat of global warming and declaring war on the sun, stopping global warming at its source. But I'll tell you what, I'm just glad to be here, and I'm thankful for the people of the United States. I like this. I can think clearly, strategize, some real strategery. I think this is the one I'm going to go with.
Excellent choice, sir.
What the hell are you doing? What do you need a head for? Don't you have one of your own? Maybe you shouldn't have lost your own head, huh? You're coming in here. You want other people's heads. Maybe you should have held on to yours, huh, sweetheart? Rather than buying my head, you should have kept your own. Whoa, what model is that?
Oh, don't mind him. That's just the Bill Burr model.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
And you have plunged into the gaping maw of Creep Street Podcasts. That's right, open those skulls wide for an extra helping of Freaky Deaky. That's right, folks. But before we begin, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter or X at Creep Street Pod. We are also on TikTok at Creep Street Podcast. Also, we had forgotten to mention it for a while as we were rebooting the whole show, but on Facebook, there's a group anyone can join. It's free to join. It's called Citizens of the Milky Way, a Creep Street fan page. You just click that Let Me In button, and one of us will let you in. All can join. It's free to join and whatnot. And of course, if once a week is not enough for you, and let's face it, we know it's not, folks, head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. And something I only recently realized is there is a free tier on Patreon. So as it sounds, you don't have to pay anything, but you can still kind of get stuff like essentially what we put in the free tier. We put up our sketches early before they come out that week. And we also have Patreon exclusive sketches that are just for the Patreon. That is in the free tier. You don't have to spend a dime. And also, I realized too, I didn't know, you can also buy things a la carte. So if maybe you're not ready to subscribe or whatnot, but there's a bonus episode you really want to listen to, you can actually buy it a la carte without having to subscribe. So I had no idea. So go check that out if that is something you're interested in. Now, folks, we left off last week, let's just say, with our jaws on the floor. Let's just say we're going to keep them on the floor this week because we are diving right back in to Screaming Skulls Volume 2. We last left off with Burton Agnes Hall and the tragedy of the young Anne that was brutally killed by bandits as she was walking along the road and all that transpired from that terrifying, tragic story. And we are picking up today in a new location. Folks, let's waltz on over to Wardley Hall. Now, Wardley Hall is a medieval manor house in Greater Manchester. And it stands as a significant historical structure with roots that date back to around 1500. Although it's undergone extensive redesigns in the 19th and 20th centuries to, modernize it and make it, especially the external, appearance make it look more modern, the essence of its ancient origins are still very apparent when you're inside of it. Today, it serves a distinguished role as the official residence of the Roman Catholic bishops of Salford. So there you go. So going back 1500, which even in terms of the UK, 1500 isn't even really that far back when you think about it. You know, for Americans, that's like, God, that's
ancient.
like going to the, you know, that's forever ago. But when you think about like British history, I mean, all of Europe really, well, everywhere, but like British history, at least recorded history, that is not that far back, but still far enough. So we're coming out of, I guess what you would call, this is probably right around the, I think this would be right around the Renaissance era. But one of the hall's most intriguing and controversial features, as you might have guessed, is a skull, which is prominently displayed in a nook at the top of the main staircase, blending its religious significance with ancient legends and tales that are often associated with such historic properties. The bishops of Salford, current guardians of Wardley Hall, they have, embraced this particular and weird, kind of peculiar artifact, accommodating its presence and the stories that it carries. They don't shy away from it, it seems, which I think is kind of cool. I always like it when a place kind of like isn't afraid to like
acknowledge their past.
Right. And not even like not even sometimes even like a bad past, like a violent past. Like a lot of times I've found that like, say you got a hotel that's supposed to be haunted. Some hotels lean into it. Other hotels don't want they don't want word of it out. Not even because they think it'll scare people away, but because I think it's like, for some people, it's like, we're too elegant or too classy of a place for that. It's not even so much they think people will get scared away. It's that like, we're too prestigious or something, They
see themselves as more tasteful. And they see it as distasteful, which I don't necessarily agree with.
Right. I think you can find a balance. You can acknowledge it and celebrate it without like leaning into the gimmick and like making it a full-blown like attraction. Like, so cool that the bishops of Salford at least acknowledged the skull. The skull there, like many such relics in historic English homes, is shrouded in legend. The precise origins of the skull remains a subject of speculation and interest, enhancing the hall's allure as a place where history and mystery meet. You've heard of mystery meat. Well, how about history meat? You know what I mean? Yum, yum, yum. I'll go back for seconds.
Although it's a little old. It might be rancid.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess if you're having a school lunch, I think I'd actually prefer the mystery meat to history meat. Yeah, ugh. But Wardley Hall's history as a residence extends back well before it became the official home of the bishops of Salford. Among its notable former occupants was Roger Downes, a lawyer and politician who lived during the early 17th century and passed away in 1638 in his late 50s, which, I mean, what do you think? 1638, late 50s, that's honestly probably pretty good for the time. I mean, not too bad. The Hall's storied past continued, with one of his descendants, also named Roger Downes, who carved out a reputation quite different from his predecessor. He was known as a notorious rake. This younger Roger led a turbulent and short-lived life, dying tragically at the age of 28. So this guy was a bit more of a rock star.
Although 28 is kind of the life expectancy of the time, probably. He lived to the ripe old age of 28.
I mean, he just missed the 27 club.
Oh, so close. Rake is a term used to describe a dissolute or immoral person. Yeah, it's just like a dirtbag.
Yeah, absolutely. So, folks, if you were wondering what a rake is, we should bring it back. Let's bring back that insult. You know what I mean?
What a rake. Those healthcare CEOs, they're real rakes.
What a rake. I'm going to bring that one back. Put it to good use. Well, the tale of Roger Downes on London Bridge is a grim example of how aristocratic excess and violent bravado could manifest during the 17th century. One night, it was 1676, and Roger, likely influenced by alcohol and a reckless sense of invincibility, declared to his friends that he would kill the first person he encountered on the bridge. True to his word, he brutally murdered, literally brutally murdered the first passerby who appeared. Okay, you see like, I don't know, like YouTube streamers who do like they'll go to like another country and do something offensive or like pick a fight, but who literally goes, you know what? I'm gonna stone cold murder. Not just like pick a fight or like play a prank.
Yeah, a prank or something like little.
Yeah, like maybe like if you're standing over an overpass, like peeing down on the cars that are driving it, something like that. Like that would be like a rascal. No, this guy's like, the first person we see, I'm gonna kill that motherfucker. I'm gonna kill him stone dead. So,
because I'm a wild man, because I party.
He's a rake. What can I say? The guy's a rake.
The guy's a rake.
Oh, man. So, he did exactly what he said he would do, and emboldened by this act and the encouragement of his companions, sound like a group of assholes.
Yeah, seriously.
Roger vowed to repeat this heinous act with the next person he met, a man who was dressed as a Thames waterman. This episode paints a vivid picture of the dangerous and often lawless behavior exhibited by some individuals of the aristocracy during this period. Literally, like, especially the whole, he's a rich boy. So of course, like, he probably thinks he's untouchable. Like, that's what makes, it's literally like it's like the 17th century version of like a dickhead YouTuber that like goes to another country and does like awful things. You know what I mean? It's like literally
it's all about
like
the clout.
He's all about the clout. Let me tell you something. Roger Downs was about that clout. He was about that 17th century clout. So, of course, like I said, this was a time when folks of the aristocracy, not all, of course, not painting with a broad brush, but really like the rich in any time era, feel like they can probably and do get away with more than the regular common folk. Doesn't necessarily mean murder, but, we see it all the time. Times have not really changed too much. Personal reputation in the time and bravado could sometimes escalate into deadly consequences, as it did on this night. Aside from being a monster a-hole, he sounds like a colossal douche. The violent encounter on London Bridge ended dramatically when Roger Downs, as once again emboldened by his previous act of murder, spurred on by alcohol and who knows what else, and of course his boys rooting him on, he attacked this man, this waterman who would work on the River Thames. These watermen were known, though, for their tough, like, dockyard bastards. You know what I mean? They're tough guys.
Yeah, hard-working, blue-collar.
Oh, yeah, and and honestly, obviously, I think this guy clearly took it to an extreme, but I'm sure they dealt with dickheads like this all the time. Maybe ones who weren't trying to murder you, but ones who would, pick a fight or insult you or, so yeah, they probably did learn, they probably were tough guys because they probably had to be because these rich dicks needed to get straightened out every now and then. But yes, these watermen were known for their toughness, which was obviously a necessity given the physical demands of their job alone, ferrying passengers across the River Thames. Roger's second choice of victim proved fatal. The waterman managed to defend himself amidst a fierce struggle. Get this. You want to talk about karma? This guy literally decapitated Roger Downs. So you want to talk about, imagine like his boys watching too. Like, yeah, come on, Roger, go get him.
His cronies.
And then literally the dude gets beheaded. Like, insanity. Like, I mean, a good comeuppance, but talk about one-upsmanship. Jesus Christ. But hey, he probably, who knows, maybe the body from the first murder was already there. And so he knows, this isn't just like a fist fight. I gotta literally defend my life, like life for life. So
this guy will kill me.
Yeah. So like literally he went to town, man. He went to town on old Roger. In a grim turn of events, Roger's body was then thrown over the side of the bridge while his severed head was left behind. Sounds like the bastard got what was coming to him. I mean, damn, talk about a instant karma. Like, you would think he must have done something like this before, because I can't imagine that first person he killed was the first, because you would think that doing that for the first time, I don't know, I could be wrong. Obviously, I've never killed anybody, but
you'd think it's the kind of thing that you'd build up to over time. Probably, at the very least, I would imagine Roger was a violent guy.
He must have been a true bastard.
I mean, he was so comfortable with it and so casual about it that, again, he was doing the first time, he's doing it just to impress his drunk friends. But obviously, anybody who commits murder for fun pretty much deserves to be murdered.
Yeah, and he got it in about the worst way you could get it. And kind of, in front of his boys, too. So it's like an added level of, it didn't just happen, it happened for an audience. You would wonder, and you gotta think, too, when his friends realized that the waterman was getting the upper hand, you gotta think they probably even tried to somewhat intervene, which means that guy probably fought them all off. Like, this was one tough motherfucker.
This guy's a legend in his own right.
This guy was literally like Wolverine or something. Like, he was literally like just he's literally like a John Wick type dude of the 17th century. Just goes in and Krav Magra's everyone in the joint, This is like Roadhouse, 17th century Roadhouse. Yes, I like to think the waterman just wears a karate gi tucked into jeans, just like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. But anyway, shocked by the sudden and brutal outcome of the fight, Roger's friends retrieved his head and, adhering to a somewhat morbid sense of duty, they delivered it to his sister. Oh, God. Imagine that. Like, I guess, you want to report what happened.
Yeah, but
like,
what?
You would think maybe, hey, we gave the head to the police or something, or maybe let the police give her the details. Maybe just say your brother died. He literally brings the frickin' head.
Right.
Like, clearly shows you these guys were like, there was something wrong with them. Like, the whole group of them. They sound like literal demons.
I know. I mean, it was probably a pretty violent, pretty brutal, barbaric kind of era. I mean,
yeah.
People still commit, obviously, heinous acts, but the further you seem to go into the past, the more lawlessness there just seemed to be. And when there's less repercussions, people will do the worst kind of things.
I was just listening to a quick shout out to a very popular podcast, Last Podcast on the Left. They did an episode on the like awful deaths of the early Christian saints. Like, when it was literally government mandated. Like, you want to talk about the most inhuman, and this isn't just a Christian thing, all throughout history, just the ways people used to kill people back then. Like, literally, like, it's an episode all its own. It is, oh my God. But yeah, no, you're right. And you got to think, however he did it, it probably wasn't swift. I imagine he had to do it with a knife and just kind of grind away at it. It's not like he could just, a quick chop and it's done. I'm sure he was sawing away at the bastard.
Probably. It made me wonder, I wonder what he used. I mean, as the waterman, I wouldn't imagine they would have an axe just laying around.
Right. And even then, if it's a hatchet, you're still going to have to give it a few whacks, you know what I mean? Like, God, YouTube, please let us put I was going to say, hopefully this episode doesn't get flagged. But no, I'm sure I'm just kidding. But yeah, like, you're right. The farther you go back, just the barbarism, and we always say this, and not even in terms of murder stuff, but think about medical procedures and how now there's certain things we look back and we think, wow, that was barbaric. Think about 100 years from now, what they're going to look back on us and think, Jesus, they did that? Advil? Those bastards! Those sick
Didn't they know?
Didn't they know? They could have lived to 175 or something, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, they'll, like, who knows what in 100 years the things that we take as normal will probably be seen as monstrous.
It's kind of the paradox of knowledge, too. You
Yes.
don't know what you don't know. And you think you know certain things until they come along and showed that they were wrong.
Right. And you know, we've something I've always said too is like, you know, I think like, say, like, you know, we've done an episodes on the Salem witch trials, and, you know, in 2025, we all like to think, well, if I was there, I wouldn't have, you know, but who knows what you would have thought back then. Think about it. You're in a incredibly oppressive religion. You are literally told that the devil is out to get you, like, everywhere. It kind of makes sense that people would start to think their neighbor was a witch. Like, you don't know, like, how you would react. Like, we like to think that we would be above it, but who knows how we'd do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. We have so many biases and psychological tendencies that are kind of, unless you are aware of them, unless you have studied them, you really are likely to fall into a lot of them. A good example is the crowd effect. They did a study not even that long ago. I feel like it was probably in the last 20 years where somebody would lay in the street in a big city pretending to be hurt, and people would just keep passing by because everybody thinks somebody else will do something about it.
Right.
And I mean, it's just, some of these things are just human psychology.
Yeah. Hey, folks, be the change you want to see in the world. Am I right? Be the change. Be the change.
Maybe you're right and they're all wrong.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Maybe I will cut the head off the next person I see. Just kidding. Anyway, so yes, this group of ruffians, seemingly seeing it as their duty, delivered Roger's head to his sister. This event not only marked a brutal end for Roger himself, but also added a dark chapter to the family's history, contributing further to the grim legacy surrounding Wardley Hall, where his head allegedly ended up. So, apparently, as the story goes, Roger's head was initially buried in the local churchyard, but similar to the tale of Anne Griffith in the last episode we covered, although Anne was a sweetheart, she wasn't a piece of shit like this guy, Roger was said to be displeased with this arrangement and began to haunt Wardley Hall. In an effort to quell the disturbances, his sister retrieved the head and placed it in a nook on the staircase, which reportedly brought peace to the house. So, there we go. However, the legend faces scrutiny from historical accounts. Don't they all? In 1799, in an attempt to verify the identity of the skull, Roger's coffin was exhumed and his body was found almost intact, including his head, suggesting it had been retrieved from the Thames where it was initially discarded. Meaning the body, not the head, because we know they didn't put the head in the Thames. It was they threw the body, which means they must have, dragged the river and got the body out. Once again, probably a benefit of the wealthy. I have to imagine if you're a poor person and your body's thrown in the Thames, no one's probably going to look for you. The coffin's examination revealed that the top portion of the skull had actually been sawed off, a fact that perplexes historians, as it is unusual for such a procedure to be performed post-mortem, unless for medical or forensic reasons, particularly if his death was already understood to be, the result of a violent encounter. So I don't know if maybe the story got a little mixed up along the way and maybe he didn't necessarily get decapitated, but somehow the guy literally ripped the top of his head off somehow or something,
Yeah, who knows?
That is interesting, very interesting. Today, the narrative surrounding the skull at Wardley Hall has taken a turn from its earlier ghostly legends associated with Roger Downes. Catholic bishops who reside there now believe that the skull does not belong to the infamous 17th century asshole, but rather to St. Ambrose Barlow, a figure with ties to the Downes family. St. Ambrose Barlow was a Benedictine monk and one of the 40 martyrs of England and Wales. executed for his faith during the English Reformation. This identification shifts the story from one of spectral revenge to a solemn remembrance of a martyr's sacrifice, aligning it a little more closely with the religious significance that the residence now holds today, being, the home of the bishops of Salford. So let's learn a little bit about St. Barlow. Edward Barlow was born in Manchester in 1585, and he would later take the name Ambrose upon becoming a Benedictine monk. And he lived through a period when being a Catholic in England was fraught with danger. The 16th and 17th centuries were marked by severe persecution of Catholics, with many facing harsh punishments or even deaths for practicing their faith. I mean, you got to think, all this time you had Henry VIII starting his own church because he wanted some strange, and then his daughter Mary tried to switch it back, aka Bloody Mary, wanted to switch it back to Catholic. So you're literally playing ping pong with faith during this time era. And so, it was just a time. It seems like no matter what side you were on, it probably was a dangerous time, especially depending where you lived and all that stuff. So in response to these oppressive conditions, Ambrose went abroad to France and then to Spain to train as a priest, away from the watchful eyes of English authorities. After his ordination, he returned to England, committed to ministering to the covert Catholic community. Despite the risks, since holding Mass was literally illegal and could lead to severe penalties, Ambrose traveled extensively across the country. His mission brought him to places like Wardley Hall, where he continued to offer spiritual guidance and perform religious services in secret. Well, on Easter Sunday in 1641, Ambrose Barlow, still recovering from a severe illness, bravely held a mass for approximately 200 people at Wardley Hall. His commitment to his faith was unyielding, even under the threat of persecution that Catholics faced during this era in England. Despite the dangers, Ambrose continued to minister to his congregation, demonstrating his deep dedication to his duties as a priest. However, this act of religious defiance did not go unnoticed. An ardent Protestant, reported by some accounts to be the Vicar of Eccles, and by others the Vicar of Lay, caught wind of the Easter service. And this Protestant leader gathered a formidable mob of about 400 people and stormed the hall to arrest Ambrose, whom they derogatorily termed a popish priest. Wow, what an insult! Well, despite being warned of the impending danger, Mr. Barlow chose to continue with his Mass, demonstrating his unwavering commitment to his faith. This decision led to his arrest and subsequent imprisonment at Lancaster Castle. 4 months after his arrest, Ambrose was brought to trial where he faced charges related to his priesthood, a role that was literally, as I said, illegal under the laws of the time. Ambrose did not deny his identity or his vocation as a Catholic priest. At his trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to the brutal punishment of being hung, drawn, and quartered, a fate similar to that of other martyrs of the period, including Guy Fawkes. Very famous, folks, as we all know. Remember the 5th of November? The sentence was swiftly carried out the next day on September 10th, 1641, marking a tragic end to Ambrose Barlow's life and ministry. His martyrdom became a poignant symbol of religious persecution during a tumultuous period in British history. Well, after Ambrose Barlow was executed, his head was severed and sent to Manchester as a grim warning to any other Catholics who were steadfast in their faith. In a bold act of defiance and loyalty to his faith, Francis Downes, the son of Roger Downes, who died in 1638, intervened. Roger's second wife had been a Catholic, and she raised Francis in the old faith. Motivated by his beliefs and family ties, Francis stole Ambrose's head and secretly brought it back to Wardley Hall, where he concealed it in a hidden spot. This act not only saved the relic from public disgrace, but also brought it to a place where it was likely valued and could be properly mourned as that of a martyr. However, Ambrose Barlow's skull would mysteriously vanish shortly after its theft and remained hidden for over a century, adding a layer of mystery to the history of Wardley Hall and the skull itself. But it happened to resurface in 1745. Tumultuous time for one Matthew Morton, the then owner of Wardley Hall. Morton's estate had suffered significant damage when Bonnie Prince Charlie's troops sacked his home during their retreat north, leaving parts of the hall in ruin. In a bid to rebuild and recover from these hard times, Morton decided to demolish the damaged sections of the hall. During this process, workers dismantled a wall of the original chapel, revealing a hidden casket within. Upon opening it, they discovered a skull that was notably well preserved, featuring a robust set of teeth and strands of auburn hair, the same hair color known to have been that of Mr. Ambrose Barlow. Now, this finding suggests that the skull of Barlow, which had been lost to history, had been protected within the chapel's walls, perhaps placed there by Francis Downes or some other caretaker of the martyr's legacy. Whatever the skull's origins were, it had been the center of paranormal activity ever since. According to an account written back in 1782 by one Thomas Barrett, he wrote, "From time out of mind, the occupants of Wardley Hall have had a superstitious veneration for the skull, not permitting it to be removed from its place on the topmost step of the staircase. There is a tradition that if removed or ill-used, some uncommon screaming and lamenting is heard, and disturbances take place in many parts of the house." So we're seeing a trend from like the stories we saw last week. You touch the head or you move it, you try to bury it, shit's gonna get crazy up in that place. This is pretty interesting. Interesting that a moat actually surrounded the residence. And as we all know, as we've said many times here on the show, we know that water is often believed to act as a conduit for paranormal activity. And in this case, a servant, perhaps overly eager during spring cleaning, decided to remove the skull from its revered spot, and by golly, threw it into the moat surrounding the manor. Talk about throwing in a penny to make a wish. Almost immediately after doing this, a violent storm erupted, seemingly as a supernatural response to the disturbance of the skull. The tempest was so severe that it shook the manor to its core, alarming everyone inside. They're like afraid the place is going to come tumbling down. Well, upon discovering the cause of this turmoil was the removal and disrespectful disposal of the skull, the owner of Wardley Hall was quick to act. He ordered the moat to be dredged to retrieve the skull, understanding the importance of restoring it to its designated place to appease whatever forces were disturbed by its removal. And miraculously, as soon as the skull was returned to its original location, the storm dissipated, restoring calm to the manor and its surroundings. This event reinforced the belief among the residents there and the local community that this skull was not just an ordinary relic, but held significant spiritual or some kind of supernatural power. And this certainly ensured its continued respect and careful treatment in the years that followed. And according to local lore, all attempts to destroy the skull, whether by burning it, smashing it, or any other means, they all fail, as if the skull itself has some sort of supernatural resilience. Moreover, the skull is said to possess a sort of will of its own, consistently reappearing at the hall whenever it is removed. So sometimes you don't even have to go get it back. Sometimes it comes, I just imagine it rolling like a bowling ball or something like,
Yeah.
Like, I've always thought it would be funny. Like, I can't remember. It was on like a funny thing on YouTube. This was like years ago. In Batman movies, it's a common trope that Commissioner Gordon or whomever, they'll be talking to Batman and then they'll turn away for a second, and when they turn back, he's gone. Well, there was this funny video of what does Batman actually do, and it's him just getting caught trying to sneak away, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I forget what that was from, but I've definitely seen that. I was thinking about that.
Yeah, it's like early YouTube, but it's kind of, I just imagine it being like that. Or like, is it Thing or It from Addams Family, the hand, just like, skittering across the floor, almost like that. It like goes right back to where it's supposed to be. Given these extraordinary claims, it's unlikely that the current residents, including the Roman Catholic bishops of Salford, would want to test these legends by attempting to destroy or permanently remove the skull. The skull's reputation for returning to Wardley Hall no matter what adds a compelling chapter to the manor's storied past, blending elements of the supernatural with the historical narrative of the site. That, folks, is Wardley Hall. But we're not done. Oh, no. Let's head on over to Browsholme Hall. Now, Browsholme Hall is nestled near the Forest of Bowland, and it harbors its own tale of a haunted skull shrouded in mystery and lacking a clear origin story as well. The hall has been owned by the Parkers, a family whose name derives from their historical role as park keepers and guardians of the local woodland. This position was particularly significant during periods when poaching was considered a severe crime against the crown. The responsibility of overseeing the woodland and protecting the game, such as deer, was a very serious matter entrusted to families like the Parkers. Well, during the 18th century, consequences for poaching were particularly severe, often resulting in the death penalty. If a poacher was caught, he would be brought before the Parkers at Browsholme Hall, where swift justice was administered with grim finality. This historical backdrop sets the stage for the mysterious skull at Browsholme Hall, suggesting it might have connections to these ancient woodland laws and the severe punishments that were meted out for violators. The skull's presence in the hall, with no definitive origin, adds another layer of intrigue and speculation about its past and the stories it could tell if only it could speak. The mysterious skull, aside from having a connection to historical poaching laws, is also thought to be linked to a more tumultuous period in English history, the Pilgrimage of Grace. This was a significant revolt against King Henry VIII's Reformation policies, particularly his break with the Catholic Church and the dissolution of the monasteries. Starting spontaneously in Yorkshire in October 1536, the uprising was a major protest by ordinary people and escalated into a serious rebellion. The Pilgrimage of Grace saw peace briefly, but in 1937, a second uprising occurred when the rebels did not disperse as promised. They faced severe reprisals from the king. Leaders and participants were brutally punished, with 216 individuals executed. This included nobles, abbots, monks, and even priests. Among them was Sir Nicholas Tempest, brow-bearer of the Forest of Bowland, a significant figure whose role was integral to the region. And given Sir Nicholas Tempest's prominent position and tragic fate, it's often speculated that the skull there at Browsholme Hall could belong to him. This connection ties the skull to the local geography and a critical moment of religious and political upheaval in England. Similar to other legendary skulls housed in historic homes, this skull is said to possess magical properties and is deemed integral to the spirit of the hall, with beliefs that removing it could lead to adverse consequences. Very interesting, very interesting. I mean, poaching today is still, like, especially when you hear about, like, rare, I don't know, like elephants being, like, killed for just, like, their tusks. It's like, that shit, especially if being, like, not, like, a huge population of them. I mean, god damn, like, they're, yeah, like, fuck poachers, man. Fuck poachers. Well, let's move on now. We're going to throw in a few more shorter ones here, but let's move on over to a place called Longleat. The curious and somewhat eerie tale from the early 20th century at Longleat, the ancestral home of the Tynes, adds a ghostly layer to its storied history. When Henry Tyne was only 11 years old and would later become the 6th Marquess of Bath, he discovered a skull unearthed in the ground. His youthful curiosity led him to a mischievous act. He acquired the skull from the gardener and took it on a bike ride, which ended in a minor accident, causing him to fall and sustain injury. This incident wasn't isolated, as it appeared that disturbing the skull brought misfortune. All 4 individuals that were involved in the discovery of the skull ended up with injuries by the end of the day. Given that Longleat was constructed on a site that was once a monastery, it's speculated that the skull might have originated from a monastic burial ground, possibly belonging to a monk who obviously wouldn't have taken kindly to his remains being disturbed, let alone, being used as a plaything. Now, luckily, obviously what they did was wrong, bad boys, but, it sounds like they were kids. Luckily, it was just like, they just probably got banged up a bit and not killed. That was a bit of relief. But interesting that all 4, because, one kid on his bike holding the skull and he falls, that's understandable. But the fact that like all 4 kids somehow ended up getting injured that day, then it's like, okay, 4. For all of them really involved. And in the same day. It wasn't like, a month later, this and that. Like when we did the story of the curse of King Tutankhamun and all the deaths that are supposed to be associated with that. There's like a certain amount of deaths that happen within days of the discovery where it's like, holy shit, that is. But when people start dying, 20 years after the fact, it becomes more like, well, maybe it's connected, but
How could you ever, actually establish a connection at that point?
Exactly. And one of my favorite details from that story, if it's true, from the sources, many sources claim that the second they cracked the seal of the tomb, the lights in Cairo went out. So it just gives you like a, man. So things like that. There was a number of deaths that happened immediately after where it is like, now that's weird. That is like really weird. And how they would die, stuff like that was very, very weird. But luckily it sounds like no one died, but the boys probably learned a valuable lesson about, not walking around with human skulls. Now, folks, let's talk about
the Red Barn Murderer.
The story of the Red Barn Murderer, whose real name was William Corder, is one steeped in notoriety and grisly fascination. Corder committed a heinous act in the 19th century when he murdered his lover, Maria Martin, who was pregnant at the time and pressing him for marriage. He buried her body in a red barn, which would give the crime its infamous name. I mean, talk about an episode of Maury. I mean, good God, it's one thing to be be a dickhead enough to not want to stick around and support the child, but Jesus Christ.
These people take things to the extreme.
Jesus, God, that is like we said, it's just God damn, what the hell? You're already an asshole by not. If you have to be an asshole, just leave. Just leave. Don't.
Well, I guess there's no other choice. I gotta kill her.
You're right. It's if you've got to be a dickhead and not help her raise this child, at least just leave and not, what? So stupid. So stupid. Following the discovery of Maria Martin's remains and a subsequent investigation, Corder was apprehended, tried, and executed for his crimes in 1828. His execution drew a significant public audience, and his body subsequently became a subject of macabre interest. In line with the morbid practices of the era, his skeleton was preserved and used as an anatomical teaching aid. Furthermore, relics associated with his crime, including a book about the murder reportedly bound in his skin, were kept as grim reminders of his deed. So, yikes! So he got his just desserts and then some. Not only did he get hung or hanged, I think is the right word. Hanged, but Then if they really did bind a book with his own flesh, Jesus Christ, talk about Evil Dead, for God's sake.
I'm judging that book by its cover. I'm putting it down.
That's a book you can literally judge by its cover. I'll tell you that right now. The fascination with relics of notorious individuals from history often leads to bizarre and sometimes ethically questionable actions, as you might imagine, as illustrated by the story of the Red Barn murderer, William Corder. After Corder's execution, his remains became a grim attraction, preserved for both medical study and public curiosity. So his skeleton was displayed, and his skin was even used to bind a book about his crime, reflecting the morbid fascination of the era. So I mean, once again, talk about a different era, which really, honestly, when you think about the span of things, 1828 is really not too long ago. And like the fact that it's one thing to like use his body for scientific research, but then also to display him like a freak show. I mean, granted, the guy was a grade A douche, and I guess deserved it, but it just shows you too how medicine and science was handled in those days. Adding to this dark narrative, a local doctor, driven by an obsession with collecting criminal relics, coveted Corder's skull. Unable to legally acquire it, he resorted to underhanded means. The doctor managed to steal the skull, swapping it with another from his collection to avoid detection. He then polished the stolen skull and concealed it in a box, adding it to his private collection of macabre artifacts. Wow, okay, so this guy was a little bit of a freak, you know what I mean? He reminds me probably like that damn doctor we talked about in Pavalia. You know, maybe not quite as bad. It sounds like most of his subjects were already dead, but, you know, sounds like this guy, yeah.
He had more than a morbid curiosity.
I mean, the fact that you just want to collect them, I mean, yeah, a little bit nasty there. The acquisition of William Corder's skull by the doctor was intended as a prized addition to his collection of criminal relics, but it soon led to a series of eerie disturbances in his home. The unsettling events began with unexplained cries and noises suggesting the presence of someone unseen moving around the house. These mysterious occurrences escalated one night when the doctor was investigating the sound. He encountered a chilling sight. A disembodied hand appeared to open the door to the room where the skull was kept. Moments after seeing this spectral hand, a terrible crash came through the room. The doctor attempted to investigate further, but as he approached, he was repelled by a powerful rush of cold air that forced him back, adding a physical barrier to the already frightening visual and auditory phenomenon. So it's not just like is usually associated with paranormal activity, like a dropping of the temperature. This literally, it was almost like a blast of wind pushing him back. So this thing clearly had some sort of power. And you got to think, if this doctor was a bit of a sicko, I mean, that's a lot of negative energy for these things to feed on. So, I mean, that's another thing to think about. Gathering his courage, though, he eventually entered the room, only to find the glass case and the box that had contained the skull shattered completely. Amidst the wreckage, the skull of Corder was found, not hidden away as before, but sitting prominently on display. This thing wanted an audience, man. This sequence of events, culminating in the dramatic display of the skull, suggests a haunting tied to the relic. The disturbances could be interpreted as manifestations of Corder's restless spirit, possibly discontent with being displayed as a mere object of curiosity, or with the manner in which his remains were acquired and treated. The eerie events surrounding the skull of the Red Barn murderer escalated to a point where even the doctor who initially sought it out for his collection became deeply concerned. Yeah, no shit. The disturbing occurrences at his home led him to reconsider the wisdom of keeping such a macabre item. You don't say! You don't say! Jesus. Faced with the impossibility of returning the skull to its original skeleton, as the skull had been polished and thus altered in appearance, the doctor was stuck with a relic that he no longer wanted. In a bid to rid himself of the cursed object, he passed it on to a friend. Unfortunately, the misfortune associated with the skull only continued. Almost immediately, his friend suffered a severe accident, breaking his leg while transporting the skull, further cementing its reputation for bringing bad luck. Driven by desperation and fear, and with no one willing to keep the skull, the decision was finally made to just bury the dang thing. This act, the doctor at least hoped, would put an end to these string of misfortunes and disturbances it had caused. The troubled journey of the Red Barn murderer's skull reached its conclusion one night when it was discreetly taken to a nearby churchyard. In a deep hole, away from prying eyes and beneath the cloak of darkness, the skull was finally laid to rest. With the burial of this ominous relic, the series of hauntings and strange disturbances that had plagued its possessors came to an immediate halt. The cessation of these supernatural occurrences following the skull's interment suggests a peace had been restored, both the disturbed spirit associated with the skull and for those who had suffered from its unsettling presence. Yeah, imagine that. Like, it's almost like a monkey's paw thing. At first, like, I remember reading that story in school, but, you know, obviously I think many people know the story. It's really an allegory. It's like you make a wish and you get your wish, but it's in a way you don't want. It's like...
Yeah, there's always a catch.
Right. Like, I think in the original story, there were grieving parents and they wished their son back, and they decided to not open the door because they realized it would probably be like their son's animated corpse rather than, you know, their son as they knew him. It would essentially be like a mindless zombie, essentially. So, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like, you know, obviously the Red Barn murderer guy was a douche, but it's also kind of douchey to, like, you know, I understand if you like weird artifacts like, you know, haunted objects or something, that's, you know, or even like we said, if there was like, if someone's will, like in Chicago, as an example, Del Close, considered one of the fathers of improvisational comedy, there's always been this legend that when he died, he donated his skull to the Chicago Shakespeare Company to be used during productions of Hamlet. Now, from what I've heard a million stories. I've heard it's not true, but what I've heard most is that yes, he did donate it, but they've kept it, but they've never actually used it in a production.
I understand completely. That would be really strange.
Yeah, he was a wacky guy who loved drugs and loved South Park, apparently. But you can actually see him in the movie. He's been a few things. He's briefly in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I think. Not the Bueller, but the other teacher who's like writing on the chalkboard. That's Del Close. But let's talk about the history of this, the history of Screaming Skulls, where these legends might originate from. Because the fascination with skulls and their association with the supernatural can be traced back to ancient traditions and beliefs about the head being the seat of the soul. This idea was particularly prominent among the Celts, known for their practices of head hunting and revering the heads of their enemies. Once again, like we said, the ancient Celts, they passed on their traditions orally, whereas, like we said, the Romans wrote everything down. So keep in mind, a lot of what we know about, you know, the ancient Gauls and the barbarian tribes, the Celts, is from a secondhand point of view of people who probably didn't look too kindly on them. So keep that in mind. But yeah, so apparently the ancient Celts would collect the heads of their victims, and not necessarily in a way of like, this motherfucker, but sometimes in a way of like reverence, almost in a way. In Celtic culture, the head was considered the home of the soul. This belief made the head, particularly the skull, a powerful symbol of spirituality and psychic power. The Celts would often decapitate the heads of their enemies to capture their spiritual essence, which they saw not merely as a trophy, but as a revered token of the enemy's spirit and strength. It's almost like they're absorbing their strength, but in a weird way too, kind of, what we would find monstrous, but in a way, almost honoring a respected foe. And it's natural. The Romans, who did not do this, the Romans saw this and probably thought, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? So once again, like we said, everything we know about the Celts, it's hard to, obviously there's things we do know for a fact, but we also always remember that, like you said last episode, Gage, history's written by the victors. And so a lot of these accounts, especially if they were a culture that did not write things down, we kind of get their information secondhand from sources that might not be kind to them. So something to always remember. Now, Roman observations, the practice of headhunting by the Celts was well documented by Roman historians who noted how these heads would be proudly displayed in the huts of Celtic chieftains. To the Romans, obviously, this practice was very disturbing, but to the Celts, it was a sign of respect and honor to a worthy opponent. The heads displayed were often believed to possess supernatural properties, serving as protective charms or sources of spiritual guidance. Now, there's numerous legends about Celtic heads that were said to have supernatural abilities, including the power to even speak and even give prophecy. These heads were not only symbols of power and protection, but also served as oracular devices through which the Celts could communicate with the spirit realm and gain insights into the future, almost like scrying, except with, you're not using a reflection like we covered in Haunted Mirrors, but almost like a way of connecting with the other side. The belief that skulls are connected to the soul and can continue to possess spiritual powers even after death has permeated various cultures and epochs, contributing to the enduring mystique of skulls in ghost stories and paranormal lore. And this enduring fascination with haunted skulls in Britain in particular, such as the one at Browsholme Manor that we covered in the last episode, may indeed draw from ancient Celtic beliefs that the soul resides within the head. And this cultural perspective, emphasizing the head as the seat of wisdom and the spirit, could underpin the numerous legends of haunted skulls throughout the region. For example, to just kind of give like an analogy, at Halloween, we like to carve pumpkins, make jack-o'-lanterns. We do all manner of faces and whatnot. Well, ancient Celts would carve gourds near Samhain because the belief was that the veil between us and the other side was thin. So you could also communicate with past loved ones. But if there were any angry spirits, these faces that were carved into gourds and pumpkins and whatnot were meant to confuse them, confuse these vengeful or angry spirits. So it's kind of like that. We still have this thing that has now become something totally different. Today, most people probably don't know that. They just know you carve a pumpkin. You don't think about the ancient origins of why we do it. And what was a practice might continue through the ages, but the meaning of that practice might change. So the Celts, with their practices and spiritual beliefs deeply rooted in the significance of the body's head, it revered it not only as a container of the soul, but also as a potent symbol of power and identity. They would preserve the heads of the deceased, particularly of honored and feared enemies, attributing mystical properties to them. Even after the Celts were pushed into regions like Wales and Ireland, their cultural imprints persisted throughout Britain, influencing folklore and local customs. The belief in the supernatural power of heads and skulls could be seen as vestiges of these ancient traditions. Haunted skulls, for particular, because of this Celtic history and whatnot, that's where you get the majority of stories of screaming skulls or haunted skulls. Now, obviously, there are stories of haunted skulls from all over the world, but there seems to be kind of an epicenter of it in the British Isles, between Ireland and the British Isles and whatnot. There's like a concentrate. It's concentrated there. Like the skull at Browsholme Manor, It's said to be potentially prehistoric, maybe even linked to early Celtic inhabitants of Britain. This connection might suggest that some of the mystical reverence for the heads has transcended through the centuries and embedding itself in stories and myths surrounding such artifacts. And the narrative of the Browsholme skull, with its supposed need to remain within the manor to maintain peace, this mirrors the Celtic practice of keeping and venerating skulls for spiritual protection and guidance. That's something to think about. Maybe when the skull leaves, it's not because and shit starts happening. Maybe it's not always necessarily because the skull's angry. Maybe it's because it's not there to protect you from whatever is angry or something.
Interesting idea there.
Yes, absolutely. And as you can imagine, folks, with haunted skulls, naturally comes legends of headless ghosts, there's a number of them in British folklore, often intertwined with historical events, particularly executions or violent accidents that resulted in beheading. These spectral figures, sometimes seen alone on horseback or driving ghostly carriages, capture the imagination and evoke the darker sides of historical storytelling. You know, like we said in the last episode talking about Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, obviously a work of fiction, but it's based in a real history of, in his story, the Headless Horseman is the ghost of a Hessian soldier. And I think we explained last time that the Hessians essentially, I believe, were German mercenaries that worked for the British side, just like how the French helped us during the Revolution. So it makes sense why this fearsome ghost to Americans, it would be someone who was once an enemy, like a Hessian soldier. So like that's where, you know, a lot of these interesting stories come from, some based in, you know, some fiction, some based in supposed fact. Headless horsemen and coachmen are frequently depicted as riding horses or driving carriages, which are sometimes also headless, like the horses themselves are headless. And this motif extends to stories where the ghost carries its own head even, dramatically underscoring the violent circumstances of their death. Yeah, that's the other thing. Sometimes they're carrying it around like they're in Beetlejuice or something.
Right, like a fancy accessory, like a gruesome accessory.
Like Hocus Pocus. The zombie guy, Billy or whatever his name was, his head, he's got to like pick it up and he's like, you know, he's got to tell his body over here, you know, when it's stumbling around, you know, kind of like that, you know, it's in that vein.
Highly inconvenient.
Highly inconvenient. And there's historical figures, notably, as we all know, Anne Boleyn, one of the most famous figures associated with headless ghost lore. It's said that she can appear without her head or accompanied by a headless coachman. And the lore suggests that on the anniversary of her execution, she is seen at Wardley Hall, carried in by a phantom coach, driven by a headless coachman, with her severed head resting on her knees. Anniversary sightings are very common. This is, you know, maybe some kind of a residual thing. It's however this cycle of energy persists doesn't necessarily mean it's actually Anne Boleyn conscious there, but maybe her energy or something that is playing on repeat, because these apparitions are often reported on significant dates, such as the anniversary of the ghost's death or their execution, linking the supernatural events to historical timelines. For instance, at Wardley Hall, sightings of headless apparitions are tied to the dates of Anne Boleyn and her brother's deaths. Now, execution by beheading. Many of the legends of screaming skulls originate from the historical practice of beheading. Either as a form of execution or as a result of accidents, the trauma and drama, that's a nice rhyme. That sounds like a good album title, Trauma and Drama. Or Drama Trauma. Drama Trauma.
Yeah, something like that.
Drama Trauma. But the trauma and drama surrounding such deaths seem to leave a psychic imprint or folk memory that fuels these ghost stories. I like that term, a folk memory. It's like a collective memory that you take as truth, even if it might not necessarily be. It's because it's a part of your heritage and a part of like the essence of the location. You know, I like that term, folk memory. But they're often screaming skulls, and headless ghosts are often also reflections of guilt and injustice. Often these stories reflect a societal memory of injustice or a dramatic end that left the spirit restless, such as the case of Anne Boleyn, her controversial execution by Henry VIII, her husband. The Tower of London is a prime example of such historical drama. I mean, damn, talk about trying to get out of a marriage, for Christ's sake. Obviously, too, these kinds of legends vary region by region. Like I said, it's not just the British Isles. There's stories of headless specters and haunted skulls all over the world. But across the country, variations of headless ghost stories adapt to local history and notable figures, showing the adaptability and regional specificity of ghost lore. For example, the headless coachman driving towards Wardley Hall in Beccles on Christmas Eve. Though its significance is less remembered, it underscores the enduring fascination with these eerie tales. So yeah, you might have a skull that goes back 500 years and, it haunts a family or whatnot, and it gets passed along through the ages. Well, if history records aren't kept well, that skull might then be associated with someone else. And it doesn't mean it's not haunted, but it gets associated with maybe the wrong figure. Or maybe once time passes and people associate it with another individual, maybe that individual's spirit is then connected to that skull. It's like a thing that it can reside in. It's like a place where it can be remembered and exalted.
Yeah, not really getting the credit they are due. Kind of like studio musicians.
Exactly. I mean, come on.
That was my haunting.
Yeah.
That was me. Come on.
Yeah.
Giving
Come on.
credit to this other guy.
I'll see you in court. These stories serve not only as thrilling ghost tales, of course, but also as reminders of our past, where the brutal realities of historical figures and their lives and deaths continue to echo through the centuries. The prevalence of these stories across various locales of Britain also highlights the deep cultural layers of storytelling and the human fascination with the macabre and the mysterious. I mean, let's be honest, even though it might be ethically and morally wrong, like back in the day, they literally had freak shows. They would display, sometimes, and I hate to use that term freak show, I should use a different term, but
that's probably what they would have called it, right?
Right. Like sometimes it was people that had a deformity and they would be display, like what's the famous movie, The Elephant Man or something, or things like that. Like the way we
label.
Yes. And humans do have an innate fascination with things like that. Like maybe this is a weird example. These aren't really for me, but it's like how there's entire shows dedicated to popping pimples. I can't do it, but things like that. We're fascinated sometimes by the grotesque. I mean, that's what horror movies are, right? Or horror stories.
Yeah, at the very least, the morbid.
Exactly. We're fascinated by the grotesque and what we fear. Not all tales of headless ghosts, though, are drenched in sorrow and doom. Some even seem to carry an unexpected, even mischievous sense of humor about their grim fate. Or perhaps it's simply the living who find dark humor in these eerie spectacles. A perfect example of this peculiar twist can be found at St. John's College in Oxford, where the ghost of Archbishop William Laud is said to make his headless rounds. Laud, once Chancellor of the University and later Archbishop of Canterbury, met a grim end when he was executed for treason at the Tower of London in 1645 during the turbulent years of the English Civil War. His spirit, however, is far from forgotten. Stories tell of him haunting the college library, appearing headless, and on at least one notable occasion, playfully bowling his severed head across the floor like a ghastly game of bowl. I mean, now that's, at least he's got good humor about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, wouldn't you have to?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you kind of gotta.
Maybe he's bored. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe he's actually just having fun. He doesn't have access to a bowling ball.
Right? Maybe he's hazing the freshmen. All the pledges, all the fraternity pledges, he's hazing the freshmen. Adding a curious detail to the legend, some witnesses claim that Log's ghost also appears to be missing his lower legs. I'm guessing that means maybe from like the knee down. This strange phenomenon, however, has a more earthly explanation. Over the centuries, the floor level in the college has been raised. So, Laud, still true to the architecture of his own time, might walk and roll his head along the original, now lower floor level, which is something we've talked about many times in past episodes. You know, obviously they say remodeling a house can up the activity, but some also believe that even if a house gets completely redesigned, a specter living there might still reside by the original blueprint. It might not even recognize the new layout. That's why you might see it walk through the wall or something. It's because at one time there wasn't a wall. It's just going down a hallway or something.
Which might explain why people might see things outdoors as well, because maybe there used to be a building there and then now there's not. And
exactly.
Now maybe that spirit haunts that field or whatever.
Exactly, absolutely. Another particularly eerie tale of a headless haunting comes from Hurgest Court, where the restless spirit of Sir Thomas Vaughan, better known as Black Vaughan, is said to linger. Vaughan met his end during a skirmish in 1483 where he was captured and executed, yet his story didn't end with the fall of the axe. According to the legend, Vaughan's head fell from his shoulders, his loyal black hound apparently refusing to abandon his master even in death, and seized the severed head in its jaws and fled the battlefield. Since that bloody day, sightings of a spectral black hound carrying Vaughan's head have been reported both around Hurgest Court and along the lonely nearby roads. And over the centuries, the story of Black Vaughan and his faithful hound have become woven into the fabric of local folklore, a haunting reminder of loyalty beyond death, man's best friend, you might say, and a spectral sight that continues to terrify those who cross its path on dark, windswept nights. And even though I think this is different, what we're talking about here, we've done an episode in the past. Another common paranormal phenomenon reported in the UK are hellhounds. Literally kind of what they sound like, these wolf-like big black dogs with like fiery eyes that sometimes even have fire coming out of their mouths. Essentially, sometimes they're there to drag someone to hell, you know, that sort of thing. So legends of like phantom hounds and phantom dogs are actually also quite common in the UK as well. Perhaps then it is for the best that these haunted skulls remain quietly ensconced in the houses they've claimed as their own, tucked safely away behind ancient walls or perched high among the rafters. Their presence, strange as it may seem, brings a peculiar kind of balance to the old places. Guardians as much as relics, their stories woven into the very bones of the building. The lesson here is simple. If you ever find yourself moving into a historic home and stumble upon a lone skull resting in a cupboard, or hidden in a crawl space, or nestled among the beams, it's probably best to leave it be. Treat it as you would any vital part of the house. No different than a door that groans in the night or windows that rattle when there's no wind. It's not just a remnant of the past, it's part of the house's soul now. And some things, once disturbed, are very reluctant to forgive. Now, Gage, we're kind of at the end now. Obviously, like, it's hard to say, like, for example, you don't mess with graves, right?
Nothing good comes from it.
Right, and I think it comes from movies and stuff like that. There's the cliche of a Native American burial ground, when really it's like, I would think any burial ground. Like, if you f***ed with any, why, you know what I mean? Like, I'd be pissed if you messed with my grave. I think it's a silly thing that we...
Superstition really based around a culture more than just death itself or the
right.
graveyard itself.
Right, you know, it's almost a stereotype in a way, when really it's like, you wouldn't want to fuck with anyone's grave. Like that just, with any burial ground, that just seems like common sense to me. But I think maybe just from popular films and stuff like that, it's just kind of become a thing of pop culture. But yeah, it's like I've always said, like, who messes with any grave? But what do you do if it hasn't yet been buried? If you find a skull, that's not been buried. Or like we said too, we talked about last week, where is that line? Because obviously we do excavate when we find ancient burial grounds. Sometimes we excavate them and study them and stuff. And maybe, one, there's the distance of time, but two, maybe if it's done out of an honest sense of research, like we said, like say it's an ancient Celtic skull, the little we know about the Celts comes from sources that may or may not be fully true. Maybe in a way that would be respectful to examine a grave or a skull of an ancient burial, because it might allow you to reveal their real truth, and they would want that. Like we said, I feel like there's a stipulation, like 1,000 years. You know what I mean? There's like a stipulation where it's like, obviously you're not going to dig up someone who just died like a week ago. I would say even going back a couple hundred years. Well, one, I would dig up anything, but I just mean.
But probably, I think a good rule would be as long as there's no living family members who have any feelings about it, or, because, yeah, obviously there's some people who would probably visit graves of their great-great-grandparents, knowing that that's such a part of their heritage and whatnot. But the further out you get, the less there's anybody living who's going to have a problem with it either.
Right. And it also depends on the culture. Like, certain parts of the world, even if the graves are ancient, seen it as a sign of immense disrespect, so views on it change too from region to region and whatnot. So that's, another thing to factor in. But good golly, that is going to wrap us up with Screaming Skulls Volume 2. And like I said, I was so surprised by this because I had always heard of the Screaming Skull of Bettiscombe Manor. And I thought that was just like a one-off, it's a haunting that involves a skull. I didn't realize that haunted skulls were like their own genre of the paranormal. So I'm so glad I found this source. And like I said, it's one of those where it includes an interesting history lesson along the way. And man, fuck that Roger Downs guy, am I right? Jesus.
Yeah, biggest asshole of the whole thing, really.
I mean, the two stories that stick out the most are the awful thing that happened to the young Anne Griffith that was, that's just so sad. And like, she wanted to stay in the house. That just like, it like breaks your heart. And then part two, you get this like grade A douchebag who's just like, like, oh my God, what a story.
Who just murders on a Friday night for fun.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Gage. I got a list of names of people I wouldn't murder on London Bridge.
Oh, yeah? Who's that?
The names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Serve Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Ghoulish Gert Hankum, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, the Barbaric Andrew Barry, the Mysterious Marcella, the Hellacious Cale Hoffman, and Pugblorb, the Poltergeist. Yes, folks. If you want to be just like that prestigious list of people, head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. Like I said, there's also a free tier. So if you want to hear sketches early, even some Patreon exclusives, go on over there and check it out. Now, it'll be too late by the time you hear this episode, but tonight, as we're recording, later this evening, Gage, some of his music is going to be played on, Western Radio? Is that what it's called?
RadioWestern.ca.
Yes, his music is going to be featured this evening on a Canadian radio station. radiowestern.ca if you're looking for it. Now, like I said, this will, by the time this episode comes out, that'll have long passed, but they might have I don't know if they keep recordings of it or whatnot, but you can check out Vaporverse, which is Gage's stage name, his
pseudonym.
Yeah, the artist formerly known as Vaporverse. Check out Vaporverse on YouTube, and you can listen to him on Spotify, Apple Music. Like I said, he just put out a new one today. It's neo-noir themed. It's really cool. Like I said, one of the things I love to do is I'll turn on the Xbox, boot up a game, and I'll turn the music in the game off, but then have the Spotify app going, and I'll listen to Gage's music while I play. It's a great, just kind of chill, really cool experimental stuff. And so check out Vaporverse. And hey, if you're a podcaster out there or whatnot, and you're looking for an editor, let me tell you right now, we got the best in the biz right here. Gage Shirley, I'm sure he'd be open to commissions if you reach out to him. You can, even if you email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com, I'll make sure he gets the news. So, because if you're looking for a world-class editor, I mean, this guy has made music for mobile games, for music for short films and all that stuff. One that I was even in. And yeah, world class. So
yeah, Mr. No Face. Check that out too. I'm sure you can find that online.
Yes, I even posted it in our Patreon. I'll have to post it to the public things so that everyone can see it. Because it was like, I remember when we were, those guys, those cool, the awesome guys asked me to do it. And, they were thinking about music and stuff. And they had this like, oh, we kind of want to give it like a John Carpenter kind of vibe. I was like, I know the guy. And we sent him over some samples, and Gage's music in that fucking movie rock. It's my favorite part of the movie. I mean, the movie's good. I enjoy the whole short film, but the music is just damn good. So yes, check out Vaporverse, everybody.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate all that.
Yeah, of course. We thank all of our listeners. We love you guys. We're just going to keep getting bigger and better here on Creep Street. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
Good night and goodbye.